Hi, right. So I want to talk kind of seriously, very quickly, about the idea of ideology. Ideology, philosophy, politic, religion, non-religion. Okay, because I think generally these sorts of subjects often can catalyze the most intriguing, dynamic forms of communicative discourse we ever encounter in life. But it also, in some ways, seems to fuel the fires of various people's view of reality, and it has a powerful impact, I think, on many of our lives. We have strong opinions, and we have them for reasons. Right, so that's fine. I don't want to go into the subjective and introspective kind of exploration of why individuals fasten themselves to particular views of reality. It's a mixture, and it varies from individual to individual. I think it's wrong, actually, at least within the context of this video, to question motive. However, what I do want to talk about is the idea of dogma, in the sense that certain views or interpretations of philosophy, ideology, religion, and occasionally non-religious mechanisms or methods of exploration and explanation for reality. It occurs to me that occasionally, in the hands of some individuals, the epistemological or empirical method of examining reality can actually resemble something of a dogmatic interpretation and can hinder the actual process itself. Notably so in many famous scientific discoveries, and the inability of previous scientists to notice and acknowledge scientific discovery, and being left to others who don't quite follow the empirical method as surefastly, as steadily as their predecessors. Anyway, so we're talking about this idea of theory, and we're sort of talking about the notion of theory being engaged in a sort of, well, we're sticking to biology, aren't we? So we could use the process of transcription, DNA, RNA to DNA. So we're talking about the notion of theory being interpreted and applied to reality. Reality changes, yeah? And circumstance upon which, particularly philosophical, I think, and political theory is often shaped dramatically by environment and time period. I'm not suggesting that it means that it's irrelevant. It's not. But it's important, I think, to acknowledge that. And I think, actually, that some people, on occasion, not all the time, and if they do, it's very rare, but the idea of the transcription, really, or the interpretation, really, let's make it simple and remove the allegory of DNA replication. The idea of taking sort of theory, political theory, for example, and applying it to today's standard, when the theory was perhaps, I don't know, the genesis of, well, we could take Machiavelli, the Prince, the beginnings of what you could describe actually as sort of right-wing conservative politic, actually. It's noticeable, of course, that Machiavelli, the Prince, and his writings regarding politics have a great deal to say about today's political world, a great deal of truth to offer. But it would be sort of, in my humble opinion, often, not always, but often ill-advised to look at the text of Machiavelli, the Prince, as being something of an irreproachable bastion of dogmatic, sort of infallible legalized doctrine for political, cultural existence within a society or culture, or even within, the realms of political discourse. So what I'm trying to say really is that it's extraordinarily important to understand the facets of a particular ideology, political view, economic theorist, I don't know, the list goes on. And to understand the facets of that particular theory and the worth of it. But I think it's also extraordinarily important to be able to be malleable enough in one's own interpretative style to allow a fruitful communicative discourse to take place between various views on reality, which can be crippled by a dogmatic view of history and characters involved in history, particularly so if characters involved in history can be judged as being negative and do not in general resemble their counterparts in modern day history to an extent. In other words, what I'm talking about is context, theory of interpretation, theory of understanding literature, really, the written form, and the difficulty often of existing in a multifaceted, intellectual sort of continuum of ideological, political, religious, non-religious viewpoint, and adopting a dogmatic view of reality which serves more as potentially, not always, but potentially as a barrier for progression rather than for, well, you understand what I'm talking about. In other words, we've got to be malleable. We've got to acknowledge, I think, what we understand to be wrong. But we've also got to be pragmatic and intelligent enough to realize that the world is not as simplistic in its interactions, really, and that many theorists often seem to include the notion that it is simplistic and that theory can be applied across the board without any real, I won't say compromise, but I will say discourse. If that makes any sense. I think it does, because I don't prepare any of these things, But so I don't script it. If I was to sit down with a Word and bulletin points and we talk about it, I could go on forever. But I think I'm sure you get the drift of what I'm saying, really, about it. Anyway, so I send my kind, warm, sincere regards to you and yours. Have a cool day. Ta-ta.